Hi, I'm John Prozanski and welcome to the Health Balance Project. The aim here is to make sense of today's confusing world of health advice, strip away the hype, simplify the science, and help you understand how what you eat, how you move, and how you live all shape your health, longevity, and enjoyment of life. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a trained nutritionist, but I have been a publisher and journalist all my professional life, and I'm great at getting to the facts. And once you understand the basics, you become far better at recognizing who's grounded in reality and who's leading you down the garden path in today's media jungle. Most of what follows is common sense, but it still has to line up with good evidence. When an explanation is both simple and consistent with solid research, it usually deserves more attention than hype-driven complexity. Understanding the system gets you most of the way there, and today this is a deep dive into one of the most controversial issues in modern health culture: drugs, diets, and lifestyles, what actually matters most. It's hard to argue that body weight and how and where that weight is carried is one of the major determinants of health and longevity. Not because weight is a moral issue, not because of aesthetics, and not because anyone should feel ashamed of a number on a scale. Weight matters because it's one of the clearest outward signals of how well your body is coping with the modern world. But that doesn't mean weight is simple, and it definitely doesn't mean the scale tells the whole story. Weight is a signal, not the goal. When most people think about weight, they think about kilograms. But for health, what really matters is body composition, how much fat you carry, where that fat is stored, and how much muscle you've preserved. The most dangerous fat isn't the stuff you can pinch, it's visceral fat, the fat deep in the abdomen wrapped around vital organs. And that fat isn't passive storage, it's metabolically active. It releases inflammatory signals and hormones into the bloodstream that push the body toward insulin resistance, abnormal blood lipids, fatty liver disease, and cardiovascular risk. In other words, central fat is both a mirror of how you've been living and a motor that drives what happens next. Two people can weigh exactly the same and have very different futures depending on whether that weight is mostly muscle or mostly visceral fat. So when I talk about weight in this project, I'm really talking about how much risky fat you're carrying, what it's doing to your system, and then how best to deal with it. And to understand that, it helps to think in terms of the three moving parts. Underneath all the noise, weight is shaped by three moving parts. First, what goes in, everything you eat and drink, the amount of energy, the quality of the food, and how that energy is packaged. Second, what goes out, your baseline metabolism, daily movement, deliberate exercise, and all the invisible stuff like posture, fidgeting, and recovery. And third, the X factor, metabolism. Hormones, muscle mass, sleep, stress, gut bacteria, age, genetics, and how your body adapts over time. Now, before anyone tries to escape into ideology, let's talk about calories for a moment. True, but incomplete. A calorie is just a unit of energy. That's it. Calories come from all foods, and if energy intake exceeds what your body uses, the surplus has to be stored somewhere. Energy balance matters. But here's the nuance that gets missed. The math is true, but incomplete. Because humans don't eat calories. We eat food in environments engineered to push appetite cravings and reward. And humans don't burn calories in a static way. Metabolism adapts quietly, constantly, and that's why simplistic calorie advice works on paper, but generally fails in real life. Diet history feels like it keeps repeating itself. Every decade has had its villain. Fat, calories, carbs, sugar, ultra-processed foods. Now entire eating patterns rise and fall weekly on social media. Different rules, same logic, same outcome. Many long-term studies show that most people who lose weight through temporary dieting regain much or all of it within 3 to 5 years. That doesn't mean people are lazy or weak. It means most diets treat weight like a project. Follow strict rules for a while, hit a target number, stop. But body weight doesn't respond to short bursts of effort. It responds to ongoing patterns inside a living system. When the diet ends and old patterns return, the body usually drifts back towards the weight that matches those patterns. And not because the body is broken, because it's doing exactly what it evolved to do. And once you see that, the environment starts to matter a lot. Metabolism, hormones, and the food environment. Metabolism isn't just how fast you burn calories, it's a regulatory system driven by hormones and the brain. At its most basic, insulin manages blood sugar and storage, ghrelin pushes hunger, leptin reports energy reserves, GLP-1 increases satiety, and dopamine links food to reward and motivation. Ultra-processed foods don't just deliver calories, they deliver engineered reward. Fast absorption, intense palatability, and highly learnable craving loops. And this explains the familiar pattern. Early weight loss, rising hunger, intensifying cravings, metabolic slowdown, and eventual regain. Which brings us to drugs, because the new ones didn't appear out of nowhere. GLP-1 drugs, turning up the brakes. GLP-1 is a hormone your own gut releases when you eat. It helps regulate insulin, slows stomach emptying, and signals satiety to the brain. And GLP-1 drugs don't create a new pathway, they just greatly amplify that existing one. For many people that means less hunger, less food noise, easier intake reduction, better glucose control, and significant weight loss. For people with obesity or metabolic disease, these drugs can be genuinely transformational. But here's the key point. These drugs change signals, not environments. If nothing else changes when the drug stops, the old system often reasserts itself. And the same is true for structured programs. Programs, structure, and the exit problem. And this is where structured paid programs come in, and they deserve a fair hearing. They work because they provide structure, accountability, simplified decisions, and consistency. And while you're inside that structure, many people do reach a new equilibrium. But there are at least two problems. First, cost. Staying in the structure long term can be expensive. And second, what happens when you leave? If the logic hasn't been internalized, old defaults return. The best outcome isn't just losing weight in a program, it's learning the system well enough to maintain it without the scaffolding. So how do you actually see what's going on in your own system? Measuring the system without losing the plot. Smart scales and BIA devices, sometimes incorporated in the scales, estimate body composition by sending a small electrical current through the body. These body fat numbers aren't perfect. Hydration matters, time of day matters, but used constantly and under the same conditions, they're useful for trends, not verdicts. And wearables show movement, sleep, and recovery signals. CGMs can show how your body responds to food, timing, and movement. The value in all of these isn't perfection, but it's solid feedback. And when you put all of this together, a clear picture emerges. Diet is the foundation, lifestyle is the frame. In this project, diet isn't a phase. It's the ongoing foundation your body sits on. Lifestyle is the frame that determines whether the system is stable. Movement preserves muscle and insulin sensitivity. Sleep and stress shape hunger and storage hormones. None of these are optional add-ons. They're the context in which everything else works. So, what actually matters most? Well, the mistake is forcing a choice. Diet, lifestyle, and drugs aren't competitors, they're layers. Diet is the daily message you send to your body. Lifestyle determines how clearly that message is processed. Drugs are powerful tools when the system is severely dysregulated. So what matters most is integration and knowing when each tool makes sense. And that's the point of Don't Wait to Live. Don't chase the number, build the system, and let weight become one of the signals that the system is working. And yes, you'll probably feel pretty good about getting back into those jeans.